Hey friends, welcome back to the NeuroSpicy MomPod, the cozy sensory safe corner of the internet where we talk about neurodivergence, nervous system healing, and reparenting ourselves while we're parenting or educating neurospicy kids. Today's conversation is one I've been really looking forward to because we're going to be talking about autonomy, dignity, engagement, and what it actually looks like to support neurodivergent and multilingual learners in systems that were never designed with them in mind. This is one of those episodes that feels especially important if you're an educator, a parent, or someone who grew up feeling like you were expected to comply instead of being understood. I'm really grateful you're here for this one. I'm so excited to welcome David Schmidt Jimenez. David is a late diagnosed autistic Cuban American educator based in Baltimore. He's an ESOL teacher, teacher trainer, and professional learning facilitator who has worked extensively with multilingual learners in under-resourced settings. He's taught internationally through the Peace Corps, worked in U.S. classrooms, served as an English language development and ESOL content specialist with Tech for America, and facilitated professional learning for Baltimore City Public Schools. Most recently, he led professional learning on self-determination theory for multilingual learners for the Maryland State Department of Education. What I really appreciate about David's work is that it's deeply shaped by lived experience and by a belief that engagement isn't about control, but about autonomy, dignity, and meaningful participation. David, thank you so much for being here. I'm really glad to have you. Thank you again so much for being here, David. I would love to start a little broadly and then just see where this conversation takes us. So is there anything you want to introduce about yourself that I haven't already?
I've been doing this work in Baltimore City schools now for 7 years. The language of self-determination theory that I use, maybe some people say obsessively, it speaks to truths that I've always seen as a student and as like a co-teacher in Nicaragua, working with fantastic teachers there and seeing great teaching in the United States. I just didn't have the language for it.
Yeah.
And that's really been something that's emerged recently the last few years.
I agree. I feel like the language that we're having now has opened up a way for us to reach our students and also explain a neurodivergent student's experience in a way that like maybe a neurotypical person who doesn't understand that could understand. So let's talk about late diagnosis and burnout. I know I am definitely checked both of those boxes. As a late diagnosed autistic educator, how did gaining that language that we're talking about your neurodivergence, shift how you understood burnout, especially in relation to the expectations that are placed on teachers?
Before my autism diagnosis, I had experienced clinical depression in high school, and I had always shown anxious behaviors, but they were like manageable. Those anxious behaviors eventually turned out to be autistic burnout, or they developed into it, maybe is like a better way to say it. And what was weird, and I was talking to my therapist about this morning, what was strange is like when I was really deeply depressed in high school, like because of family and economic issues,
Mm-hmm.
like being a terrible student and just getting constant feedback how I was bad. That didn't help the depression.
Yeah.
Like that was a really rough, dark place, and it was hard to access like my cognitive resources fully, like when I'm feeling better. But autistic burnout also was really hard to access my cognitive resources. But the difference with the autistic burnout that was really confusing me, and I was like, why do I feel this way? I'm not depressed, but I feel awful and I feel
Yeah.
so tired. And I wasn't depressed because the economic issues, that was a long time ago and they've resolved, fortunately. And, feeling alone and all those things, I don't feel alone anymore. I'm married now. Right. So all the things that made me depressed, like feeling directionless, all those things are resolved. But suddenly this kind of repetitive cycle that keeps happening got to the point that I started to like behave and look autistic in public. And I worked with autistic kids, the whole person with kids that have affirmative diagnosis. And I was like, I'm acting like that student.
What's going on here?
Mhm.
And so you were probably a part of IEP. I don't know in Baltimore what we call it IEP meetings. I think
Mm.
that's the same across
Yeah.
and or when you initiate those meetings, we call it an SBIT. Like let's start a student-based intervention team. So
Mm.
you were most likely a part of those for your students, right?
I've participated in SST meetings and IEP meetings. It depends on the school if they invite the ESOL teachers into the room. But I have participated in a lot of those meetings for dual identified students and for students who are being considered for possibly being assessed for learning differences.
I also experienced a lot of was always depressed. Everything was depressed. And I grew up with adverse childhood. I mean, you don't go into a psychology degree because you grew up well. I had to understand why am I the way I am? When you grow up with adverse childhood experiences, when you display depression, it's like, oh, it's depression. Oh, it's anxiety. And I feel like they're just looking at like the facade or like the symptoms without being able to go deeper. And it was through working with my students and recognizing like, oh, like I can't even teach them until I regulate their nervous system. And it was through learning about nervous system regulation that was like, I'm not depressed, I'm dysregulated. And the difference of that was life changing because I was getting medication to just numb out and just disassociate even more. But it was like, I don't feel truly depressed because bring up something I'm excited about, bring up one of my hyper focuses. I'm not depressed. Take me to nature. I feel overcome with joy and beauty. It wasn't like I was in this constant state of depression. And yet I would display that way because I was overstimulated and overwhelmed all of the time. I was masking my face off, and that accumulates in the nervous system. I've never felt more neurodivergent than I have since I experienced that nervous system collapse. How do you move forward in continuing to advocate for your students?
My grandma, she grew up in the Depression. Uh,
Hmm.
she'd be like 100 something now. She was born in 1920.
Crazy.
Yeah. I experienced economic hardship with her. I think it's like a trauma response in like a weird way. Like I have never met anyone as stubborn and bullheaded as me. Um, and willing to like torture my brain out of like this kind of even false, now it's false, like sense of impending economic doom that like, like it all could come apart.
Yeah.
But that's not real anymore.
But
And
that's so real to your inner child.
yeah,
So
it is.
real to your inner child. It makes so much sense that your nervous system is responding in that way to protect you. And that's an insane loop to try to stop as an adult.
Yeah, I think it's one reason I'm like so incredibly intense in a way that like people don't get.
Mhm.
And like how I can be so stubborn because like to other people it's like, dude, just drop it.
No, you can't
Yeah,
though. Do
I
you think
can't.
that do you think that that do you recognize that you have like a very strong sense of justice?
Yeah, I've always had issues with teachers because of that. When it was a teacher that didn't use their authority, in like a way that seemed reasonable and kind. Yeah.
Yeah, or made sense. Like me and I
Yeah.
think that my especially my youngest, he displays with PDA and it's really difficult to explain to people because as a teacher, I'm not going to go into another teacher's classroom and be like, you need to talk to him in this way. But if you don't understand regulation, you don't understand the power of language. Like you can take a student who is happy and wanting to learn from you and wanting to engage in the curriculum, but you put a demand on them and their nervous system is automatically going to shut off. And now you're just in a power struggle with my kid. Neurodivergent children, they don't, hierarchy isn't a reason. You have to explain to them the why behind the demand. And you have to use your manners because they're human and they it's like, it doesn't like, why do you get to talk to me that way? And so I think that understanding of the behavior is so important because, like you said, you grew up going to school feeling like you were a bad student. Were you, or were you just not being accommodated?
Exactly. Yeah. And then, that's kind of like where the positive diagnosis, and for me, like it's rigid thinking and working in education, I wanted an affirmative diagnosis. I
Yeah,
don't think that means that if you know you're autistic or neurodivergent and you don't have a diagnosis that you're not.
I
But
agree
for
with
me,
you.
like, all of a sudden I went. That's why I said no constantly to adults. But inside, I didn't have this sense of being naughty or bad. For me, it was this very like logical thing. And
Yeah.
I can see as a teacher now with the design of tasks. If you have a kid that's bright, or if they have a learning difference, like a perceptual difference, like dysgraphia, dyscalculia, all sorts of things that might affect how their brain like intakes like a worksheet or like a document or a screen.
Mhm. Mhm.
So a child who's very cognitively able to engage in the standard, so to speak, the information and the cognitive skill, the way the teacher presents and designs the task for lots of different brains, it can cause this kind of distortion. And
Yeah.
some kids, it's that they perceive that it's an illogical step in the process towards the final goal. And our brains, because I remember this happening to me and I see it with kids, our brains seize. They
Mhm.
like walk up like you threw sand in the gears of like a bicycle, like shaft crank, and they
Yeah.
just seize because it's like, I
And you
can't,
and you can't go forward.
because
And
it
what
doesn't make
it
sense.
doesn't make sense, and what I really want to normalize so badly is that it is not conscious. You are not going to tell me that a child is consciously trying to get in trouble. No child likes being in trouble. Yes, like children need attention. It will, like, and if they don't get any positive attention, they'll take the negative attention if that's all that you'll give them. But no child is out purposely trying to ruin your day as a teacher. It's just not that is not and not only that, children don't have the cognitive ability to be manipulative. Can we stop pretending that that child is just like manipulating you? Like they don't have like the brain resources to be able to do that. But there's such a lack of understanding about how cognition works in education. The only reason I had any idea about how the brain works was because my psychology degree. When I would have student teachers, that was the phrase that I would give them is all behaviors communication. We just need to look at the behavior as what is their nervous system trying to tell us. And like you said, we teach kids 10 different ways how to make 10. But for a child who can do the math in their head and has a strategy to do that correctly, you have to tell me why you're wasting my time and making me do this 17 different ways. And sometimes all they need to be told is it's the standard. You just have to show that you can do it. And that's enough.
Yeah. Yeah. And like on that point of like the use of language and like discourse in the classroom, like so often kids that show a lot of neurodivergent behaviors and might not be diagnosed, they will ask questions like what we're talking about now, like, why are we doing this? And the teacher could provide a response like what you described. Well, because it's the standard and we want to make sure everyone practices it together and make sure we're all hitting the standard. And I would have definitely been like, oh, it's for everyone.
Yeah.
Now I
Explain
get
it.
it.
Yeah. Oh,
And
that's
then
why. Okay, thank you.
yeah, and like that's it. But like so many times teachers respond like with something like who are you to ask me like that question? Like why are you asking me why I'm doing things?
Don't
And
you
it's
do you feel like as a neurodivergent yourself, not only as a teacher, don't you feel like our need for clarity gets us in so much trouble? I feel like I was always accused of being argumentative or sassy. And it's like, no, what you said just makes no sense. I need context. Like, what? Can you clarify? Do you see that in schools still?
absolutely. Yep. There's this really sweet kid I have in mind that is so much how I was at his age, who is constantly getting into these weird back and forths with adults.
Yeah.
And he's always like, what just happened? And he knows he can come to me for another perspective. And I'll say, you asked a really valid question. They weren't ready to answer it and they misunderstood why you asked it.
Teachers forget, yes, you know why you're there because you planned the curriculum and you know what your job is, but kids just come into school every day. It's okay to let a kid know what is going on, what to expect. And for a lot of kids who are high masking, who are highly verbal, highly intelligent, sometimes we just need to know what to expect out of our day to orient ourselves a little bit.
Yeah, I think, yeah, part of it is treating people with respect. I can't help but think that a lot of people who are teachers are they're reliving how they perceived teachers in their childhood and how they perceive teachers in like the media and like
Mhm.
shows stuff.
Or their mom was a teacher or their grandma was a teacher. It was just like that's the family business. We're all
Yeah,
teachers.
exactly. And then they just kind of misunderstand what like good teaching looks like. Like they internalize these really like arcane ways of thinking about like a good classroom is a quiet classroom, right? Like don't
Yeah.
smile till January. Like that kind.
Oh God, yes, I forgot. Yes, that's a thing. That's a thing that teachers say. That's crazy.
Yeah, I've heard it in the last 7 years. I've heard things like I don't smile till January. And for me, I'm like, that would hurt my face. Like the kids are they're kids, and like I hope you want to smile around them. And I think part of it as a middle school teacher, as kids age into middle school and like look more adult like, that there becomes this weird like gap. And middle schoolers, especially, people want to like still try to treat them like they're in elementary school, maybe because a lot of times technically they're still in an elementary
Yeah,
school.
yeah.
But then they also want to hold them to high school level, like behavioral expectations is what they call it. Like, I don't know if that's necessarily true that they're like, but like that's like language I hear. And really it's just like it leads to like the behaviors that teachers don't want because like the kids don't have autonomy because we're not treating them like at a way in a way that's developmentally appropriate.
Exactly. It's that piece that is so missing. What is developmentally appropriate? Like,
Yeah.
are we behaving and expecting kids to like in a way that isn't going against the way that we have evolved? Like, we know what is evolutionarily respectful. And yet we're not going to teach teachers like at middle school and high school, these kids' brains are being flooded with so many hormones. They're basically toddlers again. Like,
Yep.
that's how
Yep.
dysregulated and,
Yep.
like every system is changing for them. And then we're going to give them more demands. Then we're going to give them more homework so that they can't sleep and rest, even though they are experiencing a huge leap in brain development. How do you accommodate that huge need when the system doesn't recognize that need?
My pitch has always been when I'm selling self-determination theory,
Yeah.
it's that I felt better as a professional about my relationships day to day and the learning outcomes that I was getting, which is why I became a teacher. I became a teacher to develop positive relationships with kids
Mm.
and push learning outcomes. And when I tried to do it the traditional cognitive, like behavioral approach way of like reward and punishment and grades and all that stuff, kids resented me. And I remember something clicked, and I remember I resented adults when I was that age for doing the same thing to me and taking the same approach. And I just happened to like come across Carol Salva. This is so
Okay.
she's an ESOL educator. Who's a real famous and like in that realm and has a podcast called Boosting Achievement.
Okay.
Uh, and so I came across her work, and she works for a company called Sadelitz, who's like a school like training and publishing company.
I'm writing that
And
down. Boosting achievement.
yeah, the Boosting Achievement podcast. Um, and I just through her ideas and what Sadelitz, the publishing company publishes, I have all like almost all their books. I just kept digging deeper and deeper down the rabbit hole of like what's the like theoretical and research stuff underlying all these classroom practices. They were working. Like that's the detail. They were working, and I went, this stuff is working.
Yeah.
Like this like sociolinguistic approach to like building language is working, and it'll work for all kids, whether they're language learners or whether they're just in a content class. This works. I dug and I ran into like, oh, self-determination theory is where a lot of their underlying thinking is being drawn from, this autonomy, belonging, and competence language. And when
Can,
I ran into that,
yeah.
that that language, autonomy, belonging, and competence, I went, like, that was how the few teachers in my life were able to get me to engage them productively and see what the talented label on my file was actually about.
Did you see an actual correlation with the scores?
Absolutely. I have really good data for being a middle school ESOL teacher um, on multiple tests that assess language development. One that I have like faith in, it's called WIDA,
Okay.
and then iReady tests, which I'm very skeptical of. But like I've learned to look at certain components of it as an ESOL teacher, as an English language development teacher, and and I see value in like certain things that it
Yeah.
measures.
Collecting data that you can pull from.
I'm not big on like the way computers are used in school.
Neither is the research. Like maybe one day we'll use the research to guide how we're teaching. But I want to touch on something that I feel like I really resonate with you, and it's this idea of double empathy, because I
Yep.
can't help but hear it when you talk about how you see yourself and your students. And I think that that is also something that made me click in that, like, I believed their experience. I believed that they were feeling as intensely as they were telling me. So can you explain the concept of double empathy and how you see it show up in your classrooms, particularly when neurodivergent students are misunderstood by well-intentioned educators?
Yeah. So double empathy, the way I process the idea, like as a linguist, is that basically neurodivergent people and neurotypical people use language in very different ways. And that includes our body language, like, the DSM talks about. And so because we use language in different ways, and it seems like kind of encoded in a deep way that is beyond like language learning, it's more
Hmm.
fundamental to neurodivergence than like the overall language that we acquire in life. It's like how we use language.
Yeah.
A really salient example for me, and like really what kind of set me on the path towards my diagnosis, was a moment where a student was being, I would say, displaying autonomy. People might say it was demand avoidance, right?
I love that.
And
I love that reframe, and I'm going to steal it from you. That's amazing.
yeah, they were standing up for themselves because a request was being made that didn't make sense. And the student said, "No, I'm not." And the student is diagnosed on the autism spectrum. And the teacher marched up to them and tried getting in their face. Basically, I would argue, bully them without any physical contact or anything, but through like raising their voice, physical, space, intensity of tone,
Through fear.
intimidation, trying to like insist that that student acquiesce and just do the thing, even though it did not make sense. And we knew that student had an autism diagnosis, and that student knows they do too. And that student was just self-regulating, and someone came and disrupted their self-regulation as they were just trying to get ready for class. And the student was just like, no, and stood their ground and was like, no, and just said it in all different ways and had their meltdown. And the meltdown was something along the lines of, no one actually cares about what I need and what I want.
And what's so frustrating is that meltdowns are not fun for the person who is experiencing it. It is traumatic. It
Yeah.
is traumatic for that student to be pushed into that kind of nervous system dysregulation, and then to have the expectation placed on them that the next day they're going to come in and they're going to be perfect and they're not going to have any issues but why should this person feel safe with you? You don't respect their basic autonomy. I love that you said that she was just acting with autonomy. How did you say it again? You said it in a great way.
Yeah, it was a drive for autonomy.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
oh, that's so frustrating because that was preventable. And that's what's so, like, we put our neurodivergent kids in these stressful nervous system dysregulations, and so much of it is preventable with the language that we use.
Yeah. And it dysregulated me.
Oh, I'm
And
sure.
like my mirror neurons were just going off so hot. And like I had to like do everything I could to not lay into that teacher the same way they were laying into that student.
Oh,
Uh, and I held it in, and I went home and like I had
crashed
my own
out.
milk.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah. I think what was so important to me to understand looking back is how much we do hold in that dysregulation inside. I didn't know that, like, I was holding on to all of this. I'm spending my day. I'm with littles. The middle school kids terrify me. I'm like, I can't keep up with them. They're smarter than me. They're faster than me. They're funnier than me. They intimidate me. But I can hang out with first grade and younger. I can step into that nurture role like really, really well. As a TK teacher, it was my role to not only teach kids that no is a complete sentence, that you are the one who is in charge of your body and no one else. I am just teaching them bodily autonomy. Like kids need to explicitly hear that no one can tell them what to do, that their feelings matter. And I just think it's really interesting how important language is to us both. And like how that is kind of the key, because I think it is. I think the language is the key to how we not only help neurodivergent kids like not feel shame about themselves, but how we also reorganize the way they think about the neurotypical world around us, because the way they use language is not the same. And the way that like we just don't have the same hierarchical respect that neurotypicals do. Like, I'm not going to listen to you just because like you have CEO behind your name. Like, who are you? Like, that means nothing to me. You're kind of a jerk. I don't like you. And so it like I'm not going to listen to you just because of your hierarchy in society. And what teachers don't understand is for neurodivergent kids, just because you're a teacher, just because you're an adult in the room, you're kind of mean. And so like I don't respect you just because I'm supposed to.
I have done my best to communicate that to teachers, kindly. Um, and I've tried to tell them that, like, it's not to defend that kind of behavior and how, like, sometimes it can be disruptive, but that, like, it's just a reality that you're gonna have people in the room like that you can't just expect compliance because, like, the social structure says that you have power. Like, you need to prove yourself. Care about.
Do you want children to just comply? Like that, and I don't know if it was because I was like with little 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, especially with little girls. I'm like, good, let her say no. Like, good. If our littles can't practice saying no to the grown-ups that they trust, how do you expect them to say no to someone coming to them with authority, but who has like bad intentions in mind? We have to give kids the space to practice their autonomy and say no. And that's their choice. You don't want to do your work right now? Okay, that's fine. You will have to do it in 10 minutes though. So you can do it now or you can do it later. Like, there you go. The battle's over. We don't have to have a power battle anymore. Now that children has a choice. But it's just kind of crazy how we don't offer that, and that we think that kids saying no to grown-ups is a bad thing inherently.
Absolutely. Yeah, like, aut autonomy, like anything that happens in the brain, is kind of like a muscle, and it's like, it needs to be exercised. You need to give people autonomy throughout their life so they can practice and, like, use it, or
Hmm.
otherwise they get conditioned to letting people who have authority and titles of authority make all the decisions for them, and that undermines, like, the stability of the whole system because then
And yeah.
experts aren't valued.
Yes. And not only that, you're not allowing for any critical thinking to happen. You're taking away the ability for a child to use their own not only critical thinking, but like we take away their ability to read their own internal cues. Even as something as simple as not letting a kid eat when they're hungry, go to the bathroom when they need to go potty, you are taking away that connection of like, I feel this way. I need to go potty. I'm going to take care of that need. Instead, you're deferring to someone else about like, I feel this way. Can I take care of it? It just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to me.
To me, a lot of the education practices are kind of byproducts of, like, maybe an intersection of, like, colonial and capitalist thinking, right?
Hmm.
And so it's absolutely about trying to teach people how to be easy to manage for people who already have authority. And I'm not accusing teachers of doing that on purpose. Like, I don't think it's on purpose, but I do think there's this weird kind of cultural and social momentum that, like, teachers don't perceive that they are oftentimes reinforcing,
Yeah.
um, that.
Well, and to have, because, as a parent with neurodivergent kids, and then the experience of being a teacher with 24 students that you have to manage, knowing that you have to hit all of this curriculum. Like, I also, with that double empathy, I have empathy for that teacher who doesn't have the time. And so
Mhm.
much of like what
Yep.
my neurodivergent kids and students needed was just time to go at their own pace. And that's like the one thing that as a teacher, no matter how much you don't have time for. And sometimes I have to tell my kids, like, I know it sucks. You're just going to have to mask up for this. Like, you just got to keep going. Like, the train is leaving. And it makes me sad to like have to tell them they have to abandon themselves in that way a little bit, because there's no slowing down. The train is not going to stop for you.
Yeah. Yeah, and, having lived in Nicaragua and served in the Peace Corps and gotten a taste of, like, a different way of life, I think that's just kinda speaking to, like, maybe a growth area in American culture that, like, everything has to be on a timetable and rushed, and, like, how, again, that's, like, the colonialist or colonialism and the capitalist kind of, like, mindset of the grind, 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 and not take some time for yourself, to be in community and, like, and rest your brain and recharge. And, historically, that's one of the things that, like, the dominant culture here in the US, like, throws shade on about Latin American cultures. But having lived it as a neurodivergent person and, like, as a child, frankly, like, in Miami with the Cuban family, like, it's great for your brain.
Yeah. Yeah.
We should give
So
one.
when you were teaching, like, did you get to teach in Nicaragua, like, as a teacher, or were you observing, like, as a student teacher?
No, I was a teacher in Nicaragua,
You
yeah.
had your so how, like, can you tell, like, what are the different vibes? Like, what we know what the culture of America is, which is, like, we don't have time for it, we gotta get going, we have to push through the curriculum and push kids through the system. What was the vibe when you were outside of, like, the school system?
So, like, public education vibe in Nicaragua in terms of,
Yeah.
like, um it's really complicated because there's, you have the cultural layer, but then you have, like, the political layer. I'm gonna
Okay.
talk about the cultural one because, like, that's the pretty one and, like, the happy, nice one.
Okay. Let's do that.
And the political one, yeah, that's, like, another part of my brain that I don't feel like going into.
We'll keep
Um,
that one clicked off for now.
um, but culturally, the strong teachers, the teachers that were, like, that did autonomy, belonging, and competence, that intersection of that kind of self-discovered and, like, self-knowledge of, like, being a naturally good teacher, they call it. I think
Yeah.
it's just having a natural inclination for treating people that way, you know, affirming their autonomy, supporting their belonging, and helping them feel competent. Some people just do that naturally,
Yeah.
and or maybe they figure it out after a lot of trial and error. And but, like, the intersection of the teacher I have in mind, or the 2 teachers I have in mind right now that had the vibe, the Nicaraguan vibe of, like, they like to say a phrase is they say, "Hay más tiempo que vida," which is an illogical statement,
What does it
but
mean?
there's more time than there is life. But really what it means is that, like, time is, like, infinite, right?
Yeah.
Like, time is infinite, so don't, like, overwhelm yourself thinking about the time crunches, because I think in Latin America, most cultures realize they're constructs, right? Like, people laugh at me as, like, a multicultural, like, person when I'm worried about time in Latin America. They're like, "Chill, dude." Like, tranquilo, like, being told tranquilo with that
You we
gesture
have
was
we
like
have to be productive, 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 though. What do you mean? Always producing.
Yep, I like, "You're wasting my capacity. I'm only here for 2 years." Like, and they were like, "Why don't you go lay in the hammock for a bit? It's okay." Like,
Wow.
literally. Yeah,
Could
like,
you
people
imagine
tell her
if we valued rest, how healing we would all be? Like, so many of us just need to not feel guilty about taking a beat.
yeah, and that was the other fantastic kinda cultural beat, I guess, of, like, when I called out, so to speak, which was a lot, and, like, I felt guilty about it during service. Now I, like, know it was like I was well, or it was the autism, I think. I was, like, overwhelmed and overstimulated, and I'd wake up and I'd just be like,
I can't go.
"E."
Yeah.
I can't, just, like, everything felt wrong, and the humidity, and, like, I just felt like I would, like, just say some crazy thing, make myself look bad, and I would just text and be like, "My stomach's a little off today," which is generally true also when my brain's that way,
I'm not lying.
and I'd come in the next day and everyone would just be like, "Hey, bud, you okay?" Not like,
Uh-huh.
"Where were you?" Not, "Why are you calling out so much?" Like, no judgment at all. No shade. Just like, "Hey, white dude, is your belly sick again from our food? You good, dude? We're sorry." Like,
You tummy
not
troubles.
yeah, like, You okay?" And to,
But
like,
without the guilt and shame of it, though.
yeah, like, no shame, and I did a great job in Nicaragua, and I think it was because the people in the town I lived in, it's called Condega, because they were so accommodating, and they didn't know I was autistic, they just thought I was, like, a weird white guy that spoke Spanish really well, that could be, like, really, really friendly, and then, like, hide for days.
I love
Right?
that.
Yeah, and I would, right?
And
I would
and
hide.
they'll accept you either way.
Yeah, they were just like, "You okay, man? Where you been?" Like, "I don't know, I just haven't wanted to go out." They're like,
I peopled
"Okay."
too much. Yeah, I needed to recharge for a little bit. Well, and I love
Yeah.
that I can't remember. I use this all the time and I never go back to see which culture it comes from, but it's that their word for autism literally means in their own time. And I feel like
Huh.
that kind of meshes like the idea of like there is so much time. Like it's the idea of not rushing us through things that I
Mhm.
think is beautiful. Like we don't have that. Wouldn't it be lovely if we just had like the idea of like, just let them do it in their own time. Beautiful.
I think people would be surprised what the outcomes are when you let people who are excited to do things and who ask for more time to do a good job on them, like how amazing the work we can do is when you actually like let us have the time we need. And when we get stuck, but here's the detail, and this is where it's hard for like a public ed system to like come in and put the scaffolds up so we can finish our project, to finish, the thing that like we envisioned. Because
Yeah.
like sometimes that's the issue. It's like we got an assignment. At least I remember this as a kid, and my brain would go, "Oh, I've got this great idea," but I would misjudge how much time and effort it would take, and I could do it with
Yeah.
help from adults, giving me materials and a little bit of like coaching on like things. But so many times I failed to get things done because my vision was greater than the amount of time allotted, and that was like soul crushing, like
Yeah. And
many
we don't
times.
and we don't teach children how to scaffold that for themselves or
Mhm.
see that this child like what is the power struggle here? Because for my kindergarten one, we're hitting a wall a lot, and I'm trying to figure out like, okay, why are you going underneath the desk? Why are you doing these avoidant behaviors? What's happening? And it took a lot of getting down deep to hear. And what it was is that the teacher talks too fast. I don't even know what she's saying half the time. So I'm like, you're only getting verbal instructions. That's crazy bananas. And then the second thing is that just as soon as I'm starting to get going, they make me stop and they never let me finish. And I'm just like, ugh, that's what this is about. Like, give him a table, put him in the back. Who cares if he's not moving on to the next thing? He's not disrupting your classroom. Keep going and let him work on it and finish it. And there's just this inflexibility with time that we have. What is our deal with time here?
Hearing you say that, I remember so many times, like in elementary school, especially, where the teacher was like moving too fast on like something that I guess for certain brain types that tend to be neurotypical, they could like keep up with the procedure.
Hmm.
And for me, it's like, like like trying to put dominoes up and then like one falls over because something in the environment happens and then I'll fall down and I have to kind of go back and like kind of reorient the executive function to get back on track. And that
Well,
would
who
happen. And that,
who can listen to verbal instructions? What?
and
What?
I know that happened as a child. Yeah.
I
And
can't
yeah.
I need to because you're right, something will distract me. I need to start over and I need to look and I need to check myself that I'm doing it right. Otherwise, I can't move
Mhm.
forward. I can't just skip steps. What do you mean?
Yep.
I might do it wrong. Like, and it's not because I didn't want to follow along. I want to. You're going too fast. Like it's such I feel like the context is missing in reality. Like we're just never giving the context to our neurodivergent experience.
Well, I think what I notice, like observing teachers and as a human, like I want to process things deeply and like marinate it and like really move it into like that like part of the memory where it's useful information. And when I keep getting pulled out of that and jarred out of that by like other people's expectations, um, because I know I'm not actually learning,
Mhm.
and that's my internal drive. My internal goal is to learn and internalize the information. That makes me feisty and like demand avoidant, even as an adult. Honestly, like a lot of the behaviors are identical.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
If I get disrupted like 3 times, I'm done. Like my frontal
Mhm.
cortex has shut off. I am so frustrated. Like it's done. I can't do it anymore. And we do that to students all the time. And like it could be so simple. Like please just put a visual timer up in the front so that they know that they have that much visual time left. And then they can expect the stop and shift in the focus, like the lack of understanding of our transitions and how much support we need in transitioning is throwing kids into these stress responses and making school a miserable experience. And there's like not a neurodivergent kid that I know that doesn't love learning. We just never get them into the regulation place they need to be to access it, like you said, in a meaningful way. And instead we're throwing like, now do it 65 times, 65 different ways. It
Mhm.
doesn't make sense.
Yep. It's not the right type of repetitive. You need to let us pick our repetitive behaviors.
Yes,
Don't
please. And
don't assign repetitive.
stop telling kids to stop stemming, please. Like, oh, let them get that energy out. I know that I want to respect your time, but this has been too juicy of information. But before we go, I really want to talk about two big subjects. The self-determination theory. I kind of want to dig deep into that for people who haven't heard of that. And then
Yeah,
also I would love to touch a little bit more about autistic burnout in education. So, let's start with self-determination theory because that's kind of what is the nucleus, I think, to your teaching beliefs. Is that correct to kind of say?
absolutely.
So
Yeah.
how does that play? Like, what does that look like in your work? Obviously, in my head, I have an idea of what you look like as a teacher, and I would love to my kids to be in your class. But like for a teacher who is hearing this and being like, I am so sick of the power battles that I'm having with my students every day. And you're telling me that if I support autonomy, competence, and their own ability to have their own self-determination in the classroom, I'm going to have these changes in the outcome of my teaching. Where would you even have them start? What does that look like for me, a teacher who doesn't know what that looks like?
All right. First thing I want to say about trying to implement autonomy supportive teaching is really want to do that at the beginning of the year. You don't want,
Start.
probably a little bit late if you hear this in January and you're going into February trying to implement what I'm suggesting
Okay.
because you've already developed the relationships and people's brains are usually after 4 or 5 months being with the same person have come to their conclusions about whether safe person or unsafe person. And I think it's generally one or the other. There's not much in between, at least not in
You're
middle school.
Yeah, you're right. They're planning for
Yeah.
next year. What are they going to do next year at the beginning of the year?
So
How would this look like?
planning for next year is um first recognizing that this is more about how you frame your interactions with kids and how you respond to behavior. But there are instructional practices that I use that are tied into it. And so I'm going to talk about the instructional practices real quick. The most fundamental thing, in my opinion, is to start the school year, obviously with relationship building stuff. So much options for that. But more importantly is a social contract. Um, so
Yeah.
are you familiar with the social contract?
That's how I started. We would come up with a contract. I didn't call it a contract, but we would come up with the way expectations. That's what I would say. How I expect you to treat me and how you expect me to treat you. And we would come up together with each other. Like how do we want to treat each other? And then we would all come up to the board and sign it. And they're little. They don't know how to sign their name, but they would just pick their favorite color. And it was a mutual agreement of how we expected to treat each other.
Exactly. That's it.
Yay, I did it
So
without knowing.
so that supports autonomy and belonging and competence in one move, right? Because the kids pick,
Mhm.
right? You help them and you help them unpack ideas that might not actually make sense and stuff, but ultimately they pick. It's belonging because they're being seen and heard and you're taking their frame of reference into account. And it's confidence because you're saying your ideas about what a good community looks like and what kind and fair and just behavior looks like is valid, even though you're half my size, right? Even though you're like a fraction of me in terms of my mass, you're just as valid, right?
Yes.
Your brain is just as valid in determining what good community ought to look like.
Okay, so that's an
Um,
easy way to start the school year. That's a great way to start.
yeah, but here's where teachers slip. You can't just use it on the kids to be like, so and so's not being kind. Let's unpack that. You need to use it on yourself 10 times before you ever use it on a child.
Yes. Model.
You
Like
need,
you want a respectful student, model being a respectful teacher.
yep.
Modeling. You have to model the behavior you want to see. You can't just tell them not to do behavior you don't want to see.
And so here's a concrete example. So patient and encouraging are
Mhm.
words on my contract this year. And I got impatient and behaved in a way that was very discouraging at a student. And my nature, and this is a me thing, I feel so guilty anytime I feel like I, treat a child that is in a way that made them feel bad about themselves.
Yeah.
And I stew about it, and that's a me thing. But maybe it's easier for me to come in the next day and say, hey, y'all, remember when I did that? I was not patient. And I was so discouraging, even if I didn't mean to be. It was just that I was feeling impatient that I did it. And that was mean, even if I didn't mean to be. And I was trying to be a good teacher. I was mean and I feel bad. And I'm not going to do it again, or I'm going to try not to. And if I
I
do
would
it again, I'll apologize again.
I would argue, though, that that part is vital because you are then modeling. We're all human. We all have our breaking points. We are all going to make bad decisions and not show up in the way that we want to be. But we also
Yep.
need to know how to do that repair. And part of modeling the good behavior is modeling, like, oh God, the way that I apologize to my children all the time. I'm like, how many apologies do I get before it's like, what is this apology, mom? You keep on getting dysregulated and raising your voice. But like it is the repair that matters. And how many kids actually hear grown-ups apologizing, like coming back after thinking about it, I don't like the way that I treated you. That's on me. And I'm going to do better. Like, I don't remember one adult apologizing to me ever while I was a child. And it's like no wonder we don't have adults walking around who can take any sort of accountability like at all. And so I think that that's a huge piece of it, is that you're modeling that kind of inner reflection.
Exactly. It's modeling that type of self-regulatory thinking of like, but
Yeah.
on a social level, on an emotional level, how are my behaviors impacting my community? And that's really what the social contract, when it's well executed, in my opinion, like that's always what it comes back to, right? How did the teacher behaviors impact the community? How did the student behaviors impact the community? And always using it like kindly. And if
Yeah.
you notice that you didn't, the next day go back and apologize. I misused the social contract yesterday.
Oopsie
And
daisy.
it, yeah, and like, but like it's unique humility. And like, I think that is also the hard thing. And people, I think, fear humbling themselves in front of a middle schooler or a high schooler, thinking that that's going to lead to like a lack of control.
Yeah, I think
But
I think any adult who is working with children, like that piece is so important because not only are you modeling what accountability looks like, you're also telling them like deep down that like if you're going to make a mistake, like you're going to still be accepted. Like it's okay if you mess up. Like we all mess up. And something I would do, I was very big on affirmations in my classroom. I had like 10 affirmations that we would say every day. And one of them was like, mistakes are how we grow. And like making sure that the environment was applauding mistakes. Like, you messed up. Like, all right, let's make that neural pathway. You'll never do that again. And like, you, I wish that adults understood the power of mistakes and how valuable it is, not only for actual neurological connections, because mistakes are literally how we learn, but also in maintaining relationship with children. Like kids do view us as like the end all be all. Like they do perceive us to be perfect in our bigness. And it is our job to humanize ourselves and make them understand that you don't have to be perfect to exist here. We all make mistakes. I make the most. Like I'm tripping up all over myself, and I think that that's so valuable that you are going in. I love that the way that you go into this is not as like, what can you do to the student or what do you need to do for the student? It's like, no, 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 no. This self-determination theory is actually you and how regulated you are as a teacher, how personal you take the things that the students say to you. It's really about the teacher.
absolutely. And like, I think maybe that's why there's resistance
Yeah.
as I try to promote it. Yeah, so I'm gonna come back to the affirmations because that's another one that I use that falls into like self-determination theory. But I'm gonna go in the order that I kind of implement them in the classroom.
I'm
So
so sorry for interrupting all the time. My ADHD is just like so excited.
you're fine. You're fine. Like if I was upset, you would see my face change.
You would know.
um, you would know. But yeah, so the second one is just feelings check-in, but with a visual support that like the students inform from the day, like the prior day. So if they want to see 9 goofy dog faces to associate emotions with, it can be 9 goofy dog faces. If it's 9 Pikachus, whatever. If it's 9 anime characters, like whatever. But there's all these things online you can find of like numbered like faces showing different emotions, and you can adapt it all sorts of different ways. But the key with that practice isn't that you do it, because lots of people do that. The self-determination theory, in my opinion, way of doing that is that the kids do it.
Yeah.
That is a structure that the students own every day. And you scaffold, like beginning of the year, you lead it. But
Yeah.
by the second week, a lot of times you can have kids leading it. And the kids facilitate pair conversations and then a whole group conversation around how are you feeling today? And as a language teacher, I am expanding like the language they're using over the course of the school year. So the conversations are becoming more like deep, more
Yeah.
linguistically rich. But they start off with like, I'm feeling like dog number 3 porque me siento mal, right? And then I go, okay, you're trying to say you feel bad. This is how you say it in English. And I add that to a word bank basically. And we go building the discourse out, and then you have the kids lead it. And that just becomes a structure that they crave and they desire. And you build out the conversation too. So you start with how are you feeling, but
Yeah.
then you add what are you doing after school, and then you add what's your dinner plan or what are you
My
having for
little
dinner.
my nerdy teacher is like, "Oh, look at him integrating grammar into the SEL information," but at the same time, at the root, what you're doing is you are doing that, let's connect your mind and your body. How are you feeling every day?
How are
But
you
you're doing
every
that
day?
also sneaking in without them realizing, I'm also gonna give you some sentence structure, and I'm also gonna give you some adjectives, and they don't even know that they're learning, but here they are developing this language which children need to be able to explain their internal world, and they're doing it while also learning some grammar. I'm like, that's some good learning. That is some good teaching right there.
And they're co-regulating each other, and they're bringing
Yes.
each other down to a baseline where they're ready to learn.
Yeah. I wish
Like,
my kiddos were always too young to be able to facilitate conversation with themselves, so we had to model it in a whole class way. But a way that I always loved to start, I would start heavy on this in the beginning of the year and it would fade out and students would do it as needed, but starting the day checking in. So it was part of our morning meeting, like, and I would call it like, how full is your bucket? Like sometimes I come to school and I have so many water drops to give you. My bucket is full. Like here's a little sprinkle regulation for you. But I also was a new mom while I was a teacher. So I would come in and also say, my baby was up all night. I have half my bucket and I actually need your help today. And the way that our TKers would rise to the occasion, kids understand. Kids understand capacity. And when I would show up and ask them for like, I need your help today, I have low energy, they would themselves turn to their friends and be like, you need to sit and listen. They would regulate each other because I was seeking that from them. Like, I wish we gave the children more options to show up for us as well and to teach them that like this regulating thing, it's co-regulation, it's back and forth. This is a like dynamic system that we have here.
yeah. And like that's one of the key things that I wish other teachers would process, that they're feedback loops that we cause in the classroom when it comes to like behaviors that we don't want to see.
Yeah.
It's a feedback loop, and we are the part of the feedback loop that we have the control over. The kids
Oh
are
yeah.
kids. We are in
We
our own
we
brain.
set the tone because as much
Yep.
as I would go in and be like, "Oh, I need your help," I would also come in not checking in with myself, grumpy from being woken up all the time and not have the patience I need and be like, "Why is everyone acting so crazy today? Is it them or is it you came in with crazy energy cuz you're dysregulated and we have mirror neurons. We cannot not mirror each other." you know?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. I think, and that's another thing that people or that teachers don't seem to perceive is that like internal emotional regulation is I observe, I haven't read about this, but I observe it is a social thing. and it's co-regulation.
Hmm.
It's not the child as an individual can't self-regulate. It's that the environment isn't set up in a way that is allowing for the child to interact in a way that allows for the co-regulation to occur,
Hmm.
because like people are being over controlling and not supporting autonomy.
1000%.
Uh,
Could not say it
yeah.
better. Yes. Middle finger applause. Well, we have
And
hit the hour mark. I want to keep going.
uh,
I need to have you back to talk about autism, burnout in education, because that kind of sparked this podcast. I love it so much, but I want to respect your time. And I just want to thank you so much for coming here. And I could talk for like 7 more hours because it's a different way to view education. But I think that if we treat each student with just like this basic autonomy and basic respect, and that's how we are sending kids out into the world. Like, it sounds a little dramatic, I guess, but like, I do think teachers like you and therapists like you are changing the world because you're changing the regulation of like our people, and that matters.
yeah, I hope that we, that those of us that are sticking around a little longer in education that think this way have some success, because it is really hard, the pushback you get. And I think it's not for nothing that this research around self-determination theory and these conclusions, they're about 20, 30 years old, about 20 years old in the context of education.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and a lot of the things they're published in the US. So just one last book, Learning to
Learning to
Trust, is all
trust.
about.
Okay.
Yeah.
I love that. So
Uh,
if we are, I have some educators here, and I also have a lot of parents who are trying to parent in a nervous system respectful way. How can they follow you? Can they find you? Like, how can they access resources into what you are promoting? Because all of this is, I love a research based program to have science behind it. So can you tell my followers, how can they follow you? How can they learn more about this from you?
yeah. So I have a website that'd be like the hub where you can access everything. It's called selfdeterminedbaltimore.org. My handle on social media is at be more autistic ed, and it's spelled BMOREAUTISTICED. And
Perfect.
I'm on YouTube, I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram, and I'm on LinkedIn under my name, David Schmidt. And you can find the link for my LinkedIn. It's all on the website. And yeah, so if you want to see my background, my education background, I have a pretty extensive experience in education,
I
in
would
terms
not
of especially.
assume I would not assume that you ever experienced burnout with all the stuff you've accomplished. I'm like, "What? How does he have time for all of this? This is amazing." You've done some pretty
Yeah,
serious work.
yeah, thanks. I don't, I wish I could rest. I haven't been able to in a long time.
Like, I wish my trauma response would let me calm down. Like, it'd be nice.
Yeah, but I'm taking leave. I just filed the paperwork, so I
Good
am going
for
to take
you.
leave.
You
Yeah.
know what? And I would, if you're up for it and you want to come and do some check-ins, I would love to hear, because going on disability changed the direction of my life. It really did give me the time for the first time in my life to understand myself in a way better way and to heal
Mhm.
myself in a way that I've never been able to. I mean, it really does take kind of taking all the sensory input away to be able to calm it down.
Exactly. Yeah, it's time. And yeah, absolutely. You and I will be in touch on Instagram and email and whatnot.
Yeah, keep me posted on what it's like when you have that rest, when you experience this rest that they talk about. Let me know. And I
Yeah,
will put
yeah.
all of your handles, the website, all of that will be in the show notes below so that they can find you. And
Cool.
David, before we wrap up, I just want to thank you for the care and intentionality that you bring to this work, to your classroom. I'm so excited for your students that get to experience that kind of connection with a teacher. I know that you're changing lives. And just for the way that you hold both lived experience and system level insight at the same time is amazing. So for listeners who want to learn more about your work, I will put everything in the show notes below. And I just want to say thank you so much for being here and giving me some of your time.
Yeah, thanks so much for inviting me. It was really fun to talk to you. I also enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, this was fun. Thank you again to David for joining me today and for sharing so much wisdom and clarity. And thank you, listeners, for being here, for being a part of this conversation. Don't forget to take care of yourself and take care of your nervous system. See you next week. Ta-ta!